Karen, I can't be more happy that you are here.
I'm so excited to be here.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
First of all,
it means a lot.
It shouldn't, because you know that I would do anything for you, Fifi. And you tell me jump, I'm like, yes, ma'am. Whatever you want.
Karen, really, like, you were one of the first persons that I went and I said, okay, I have an idea. It's called Influer. It's an app.
Yes.
I know you're in Meta and you have everything there, but I want to show you this. And you were like, what? Yeah. Like not even us. Like what? How you did it? How you created it? So remembering that moment and having you here, it's very important for me. So thank you again.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
We need to let's start from the beginning.
Okay.
When we met.
Let's take it back.
Let's take it back.
Yes.
When we met, 2012.
2012, I was working at Telemundo. I was the director of social media, a job that I made for myself. And you were on Corazón Valiente. And at the time, my job was really more like they kind of looked at me as like, oh, she's the Twitter girl, which like was so silly because like there were a lot of other things that I did, but the talent was like, oh, she's the Twitter girl. So I would do these like trainings for all the talent for every new novela to be like, okay, this is Twitter, make sure you have this. This is Instagram. We would do Facebook chats. Like, oh my God, I was like slightly triggered by thinking about everything. But that's how we met.
Yes, and also like that time ago, like Twitter was the most important social media. Yes. So of course that's why you were like the Twitter girl, like everything around Twitter. How was that transition, right? Because amazing. I remember like you went from Telemundo to another place. I don't know if you want to mention it.
Yeah, of course.
I know you have a blog also talking about Meta, but I want to listen from you.
So in 2013, I was going on 7 years at Telemundo where I really had like, you know, when they say like, oh, your glow up. I had my glow up at Telemundo. I went from like having the tiniest job to like having this really big job with, you know, a team under me. And I felt like now it was time to go to the other side, meaning I wanted to go to the side of the platforms. And I kind of, I just said it out loud a lot at the beginning of the year. Like when you kind of like are very intentional about like manifesting, like I'm going to do this. And by October of that year, I got a job offer from then Facebook, now known as Meta. I got a job offer from Facebook and I couldn't believe it. And I thought that they had made a mistake. But I ended up working there doing partnerships for Latin America for the first 5 years. And the last 4 years, I was there for almost 10 years, doing partnerships with creators.
Do you remember what was the first thing you learned in Meta? Something that caught your attention, like the first thing that was like, oh my God, I didn't know that.
Yes, and it's actually kind of crazy because it happened very quickly. So my first week, you know, at the time it was still early days of the company. So when you got hired, they would take you to San Francisco and you would go to Menlo Park to the headquarters for your orientation. And I realized there that I was like very lucky in a way because I was a minority, which like when you live in Miami and you grow up in South Florida, you don't realize, like you're like, yeah, obviously it smells like cafecito every day at 4 o'clock no matter where you are. No, that was not the real world.
Not everywhere,
it's
not in
like
New
that
York,
everywhere.
not in LA.
No, and especially not in Menlo Park, California.
Yes, exactly.
And there I was like, wow, and all the new coworkers that I would meet, you know, we were still relatively young, and so our conversations were kind of like, oh, where are you coming from? And what school did you go to? And I was like, oh yeah, I have an MBA from FIU. And they were like, what's that? And I was like, okay. And
can you translate that initials, please?
Everybody was like, Harvard, Stanford. I came from working at the NBA. Oh, I worked for Ellen DeGeneres. And I was like, oh my gosh. And I think that was like the first learning I had of a very humbling moment of like, this is a huge opportunity and I need to give this everything because it's just not normal, right? Like at the time, it's not normal to have this job. But I also was like, no, but you deserve this job. So go for it.
Yes, exactly. So you just mentioned that you worked with creators, right? You used to work with them. What was like something very particular that you learned from creators while working in Meta?
Yeah.
A lot.
There's a lot. There's a lot. Okay, here's what I'll say I think are the most important things I learned from creators. I think creators have a really tough, it's a very tough position because their jobs look very cool and flashy
and easy,
and it's so much fun, and you're always getting invited to all of these things and everything's so cool, but it's such a roller coaster for them, and they have to work so hard, and they have to be always on, and when they're not, and let's say you're having a bad day, a bad week, a bad month, you have to kind of like keep going, and that's really hard because the second that you stop doing your work, you know, things kind of fall down. I also think from the perspective of, you know, for let's say from the financial perspective, as people who want to get loans or buy a house and get a mortgage and grow financially, it's very hard because you have to prove to, let's say, a bank that yes, I make all this money, but your month to month can be very inconsistent and volatile. And I think all of those learnings from them made me realize that being a creator is not
what everyone thinks,
a fancy, luxurious thing that, oh my God, it's so easy. It's actually very hard, and it takes a lot more discipline than most people think.
Karen, now that we were talking about brands and creators, you know, why do you think creators are so important for brands nowadays, right? Like, why?
So I've been working in this field for a very long time. Fifi, remember that I'm older than you. And even before there was the term influencer, before there was the term creator, there was the term blogger. And even at my time at Telemundo, the first thing I did when I was assigned this job of social media was do a blogger summit, because I felt like, and I think this stands true today, no message comes across better. Like when brands speak directly to their consumers or to the end person, it never comes across the same as when it's going from person to person, right? And that person to person thing was done with bloggers back in the early 2000s, the late 90s, really. I wasn't working at the time, I was still in school. But the late 90s, the early 2000s, that was also a thing. And then eventually it started turning into this, right? Like influencers or creators. And then I think I have one like very specific memory to share, which was like, I had just started working at Facebook. It was early 2014, and I remember seeing one of my favorite creators, all-time favorite creators ever, LeJuan James.
Oh,
backstage.
Love him.
He was backstage of some like premios something. I don't know which premios, whatever. And I saw him, and even though I was there to work with like big celebrities and, you know, the Univision or Telemundo or whoever it was, I don't know, he was there, and for me he was the biggest celebrity. And I think that is so indicative of like the power that creators have, because sure, like right before that I was with like Cristian Castro and like whatever, but then I saw LeJuan James and I was like, oh my God. And I spoke to him and I was like, hey man, like it's so cool to meet you, like you should really open up Instagram, you should really do this. And he was like, yeah, you think? And like to see where he went that back then to where he is now, it was like huge growth. Very, talk about somebody who has a very, very clear path on their brand, what they want, what they don't want, very, very clear. But it's that power that human connection has, which I think is what creators really bring to the table.
And I think everyone identified themselves with him because
he's
so, you know, what happened at the house. You talk with your mom that doesn't speak English too, like Pepe. But you know, but you mentioned, of course, LeJuan James, and a lot of brands are like American brands especially, always think on using, okay, no, let's go with American creators. Let's go with American creators.
They only think about people like LeJuan James during like Hispanic Heritage Month or whatever, and it's like, actually no. Right.
No.
Correct. No. here's what I will tell you about that topic, and I will have to really limit myself with what I say.
No, suéltate.
Because I'm very passionate about this topic. Okay.
I read it in your book.
Yes, I'm very passionate about this topic. I will tell you the first time that I brought up Hispanics at Facebook. The first time I brought it up was in 2014. I had just been there for a year, and I felt like I was strong enough to be like, I'm going to say something. So I put together all this data showing at what point the Hispanic community or Latinx community or whatever you would like to call it today was going to be the largest the largest minority that was going to take over the majority of the community in the United States. Together also with it cannot not be mentioned, but the Black community equally in the sense of like the minority majority is what is the direction that the United States is going to. And I want to say the year was like 2027 or something like that. We're like right there if we're not already there. What does that mean? That means the homes are composed of people who are of all these different cultures kind of blended together. And if a brand is not acknowledging that, if a brand is not looking at, for example, the Latinx community as mainstream, then they're doing something wrong. You know,
totally.
And another point I want to add to that is that just because the content is not in Spanish, it doesn't mean that it's not resonating with the Hispanic community. Because like you said about LeJuan James, there are cultural nuances, there are cultural things
in all his videos.
Yes, that we all have in common, and that could be in English, it could be said in Spanish, it could be said in Chinese for all I care. It doesn't matter. It is just the el hecho, you know, it's the thing that we all have, and it's the invisible thread that ties us all together. And that's why I think brands really need to consider that Hispanic is not an add-on. Hispanic is not something you do on a special occasion. It should be part of your day-to-day and how you actually function, especially because of the buying power, especially Hispanic women who are the ones making the majority of the purchases for their homes. I mean, I could go on and on.